There's an Arabic saying that roughly translates to, "The fingers on your one hand aren't the same," meaning that a ring that will fit one finger won't necessarily fit the others. The same is true for the different students in your class. The lessons that will fit one student won't necessarily fit another. When creating our lesson plans and teaching our content, it is important to be mindful of our students' differences and tailor our plans effectively so that we can reach and teach all of our different students. There is no such thing as a bad student, a slow student, or a student who doesn't get it. All of our students are capable. You just have to know how to reach them. When planning your lesson, you always need to keep in mind that one size doesn't fit all, and that you need to tailor your lessons to best fit all of your different students. And so I present to you 5 categories of differences within any typical group of students. Of course, I'll be talking in general terms. There are always exceptions, and we need to be mindful of those as well. Okay, let's get to know our students. Some schools are girls only or boys only, but in general, a typical class will have a mix of boys and girls. And that is our first category, gender. On a side note, I will not be getting into any discussions of gender fluidity or gender identity on this podcast, and will be sticking with a traditional definition of male and female, with apologies to any listener who subscribes to the former. So, we've got boys and girls. Many times in my English literature class, I'd be teaching a work of literature that was more appealing to one or the other, due to the subject matter that was discussed. For example, girls were usually more excited when, say, Romeo and Juliet was taught, because they thought it was a love story. Of course, if you're familiar with Romeo and Juliet, you'll understand why by the end of the unit they were so disappointed. Apologies for the English teacher inside joke. Other times, I was teaching a story that was set in wartime and had some pretty violent scenes. You can guess who was more excited about that. So, different topics will interest different groups, boys and girls. And again, exceptions do exist. But there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying we should water down our selection so that each one will appease the boys and the girls at the same time. However, what we can do is be mindful of the selections we are teaching and fair in our choices, choosing some topics that will cater to the boys and some topics that will cater to the girls. But that's a simple solution. Let's level up and see if we can do better. When teaching any topic, we have an opportunity to focus on several things at the same time. Most topics we teach are full of good stuff and teachable ideas. We just need to find them. Let's take Romeo and Juliet again as an example. As I said, if you haven't actually read Romeo and Juliet, you'll think it's a story about a boy and a girl who fall in love with each other, but can't be together for some reason. And at the end, because they love each other so much, they decide to kill themselves. Tell that synopsis to a boy and see how he reacts. But at least you've got the girls on board. What else is in the story that can be highlighted to appeal to your male audience? Well, you've got Mercutio, one of the coolest characters in all of literature. You've got a lot of action and fights. When analyzing Romeo and Juliet, you realize that it's a story about hate more than about love. So you've appealed to your female audience by highlighting the female characters and romantic undertones of the story, but you've also appealed to your male audience by highlighting the male characters and violent themes of the story. Now, everyone is at the edge of their seat, either waiting to find out if Romeo and Juliet will end up together, or waiting to find out who will win the next fight.
So, for never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. Any questions?
The second category I want to discuss is the socio-economic background of our students. And there's a lot to unpack here. I won't go too much into psychology, but all I want to say is that your students' upbringing affects the way they think, which affects the way they learn. Socioeconomic factors can be broken down into many subcategories. I'll try to list as many as I can, and again, I'll be illustrating this in general terms. There are always exceptions. For example, some students come from wealthy families while others live in poverty, and some are actually homeless. So, are we taking into account time? Do students have the opportunity to go home, eat a warm meal, and have enough time to do their homework, play some video games, and then go to bed? Or does the student have 1 or 2 part-time jobs after school so that they can care for their family or young siblings? Something else we should note is that some students have both parents. Some have one, some have none, and some come from a broken home or divorce. In terms of classroom management, you've got a challenge on your hands for several reasons that I won't get into now. But needless to say, these students usually need a little bit more attention or a boost to their morale and self-confidence. Some students are immigrants, some are fresh immigrants, and some are still learning English. Are we being mindful of our ESL students? Because they're probably going to be a bit slower to get the content. Moreover, immigrants usually have a slightly different perspective due to their cultural differences, upbringing, and worldview. Are we taking that into consideration? And some students have lived through a traumatic experience, such as losing a parent, a sibling, or a family member, or being involved in a life-altering accident, or witnessing a traumatic event. The effects of this are pretty drastic. Again, I won't get into the psychology of this, and we'll have an entire episode on this topic, but for now, I'll just leave it here. And speaking of psychology, this brings me to my third category, psychological or mental conditions. And there are several of those you'll need to watch out for. Some students have conditions such as ADHD, dyslexia, anxiety, depression, or are on the autism spectrum, and so forth. But if you're an experienced teacher, you know that every class usually has a handful of children who need some special attention. And if you're a new teacher, well, now you know. Are we taking the time to get to know our students to identify any special needs? Are you doing your homework to find out how to deal with these students? Are you giving them the tools necessary for them to succeed? The fourth category I want to discuss is their learning style, or, in other words, how different students are able to comprehend or digest information. Your students are made up of visual learners, auditory learners, and kinesthetic learners. Visual learners learn better when they see content, such as pictures, videos, maps, or diagrams. Auditory learners are the ones who soak up what they hear, and they do very well with lectures, audiobooks, songs, and so forth. Also, those are the ones who most often listen to podcasts. And then there are kinesthetic learners. This group is a little bit challenging because seeing and hearing just don't do it for them. They're the ones who have to get up and do. You should be having flashbacks of last week's episode right about now. These students need to be actually, physically doing something. The hands-on activities were created for them. They need to take notes, ask questions, role play, or act something out, create something or move around. This is how they absorb the information. And I know we all know this already, but how are we at implementing? Are you mindful of this when you're planning your lessons? Okay, let's go further and dig a little bit deeper with the fifth and final category. Thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring this episode. Being a teacher is tough. Sure, it's one of the most rewarding jobs you could possibly have, but more often than not, you're overworked, underpaid, not to mention the stress and pressure coming at you from every direction, from keeping your students on track, satisfying the administration with your performance, and of course parents telling you that you need to pay more attention to their kid, because you don't have 20 other kids in your class. Sometimes you just need to turn it all off and talk to someone, don't you? Well, let me introduce you to BetterHelp. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of 30,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a wide range of issues. To get started, you just answer a few questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or video call. You can message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from in-office therapy, but with a therapist who is custom picked for you, more scheduling flexibility, and at a more affordable price. Use the link betterhelp.com/legendaryeducator to get 10% off your first month of therapy. That's betterhelp.com/legendaryeducator. Check out BetterHelp today. You deserve it. Similar to learning styles, there are the multiple intelligences. And this is where things get really interesting. This is how different students learn or acquire information. The tragedy of the traditional school system and formal testing is that they usually only cater to a couple of these intelligences. I'll let you figure out which ones. The original list used to have 6 types of intelligences, but today we're up to 9. Number 1, logical intelligence. Being able to analyze problems logically and solve abstract problems. These are the students who are gifted at math and can easily understand and solve math problems. A math teacher's best friend. Number 2, linguistic intelligence. Being capable of learning new languages and understanding how to use language to achieve goals. An example of this would be analyzing passages or preparing a speech to deliver in front of a group. A language teacher's best friend. Number 3, spatial intelligence. Being able to use visual aids to arrive at a solution, also known as the visual learner. These students are good at visualizing and designing, are future architects and engineers, and an art teacher's best friend. Number 4, kinesthetic intelligence. Being capable of using the entire body and engaging in movement to skillfully address a challenge. These students need to be moving and using their body, such as role-playing or demonstrating something. This is the best friend of the PE teacher and the drama teacher. Number 5, interpersonal intelligence, also known as the people person. Being able to detect and explore the intentions, moods, and desires of others. These are the students who are naturally good with people, the student council supervisor's best friend. Also, our future salespeople or politicians. Number 6, intrapersonal intelligence. Being able to fully understand oneself and to effectively regulate one's own life and emotions. The emotional, often quiet student who really understands themselves and is able to reflect on their ideas and goals. Number 7, naturalist intelligence. This is the outdoorsy type. Being able to recognize and classify the various plants and environmental species in one's surrounding. This student is a lover of nature and has a natural inclination towards the natural world and the outdoors. The science teacher's best friend. Number 8, existential intelligence. This is the student who comes up with the best questions and often has some of the deepest things to say. Being able to ask deep and critical questions about the broader human experience. The philosophy teacher's best friend. And finally, musical intelligence. Being able to produce and analyze pitch, rhythm, and sound. This is the student who is good with music and sound. For example, you can ask this student to, say, produce and edit a podcast episode or write a song showcasing their learning from a course. The music teacher's best friend. So, what's the point of all this? So what? The point is, one size doesn't fit all. Your lecture, textbooks, and slides are insufficient tools to reach maximum learning. Any lesson that is not well thought out will only cater to a portion of your class, leaving many students in the dark. And a student who doesn't understand becomes bored and frustrated, leading to negative behavior in the class. When creating a lesson, you must have all of your students in mind, with their different backgrounds, different worldviews, and most importantly, different abilities and different learning styles, so that every student in your class has a fair chance to learn.